Welcome, everybody, to the Waiver Wire edition of Fantasy Football Today, presented by BetMGM, the sportsbook born in Vegas. It's an interesting waiver wire week. Maybe there's a Jaguars wide receiver you can pick up. There's a lot of good quarterbacks that are out there if you need a quarterback and tight end. Maybe, I don't know. I'm trying to sell it. It's not what it was the last 2 weeks.
Shallow leagues is not bad. Shallow leagues is not bad.
Yeah, it's all right. We got this. And you know what? I just wonder, do people need quarterbacks right now? Do people need tight ends? And do you keep TJ Hawkinson or do you drop TJ Hawkinson? The tight end position has gotten pretty good lately, right? So
I have one league where
I TJ Hawkinson all year long, and now that he's back, I'm dropping him. No.
I'll give you an example. I have in our FFT league, I have a tough decision to make because I lost Godwin. I might not have Diggs this week, most likely, and I might not have Brian Thomas this week. So two of those guys are most likely not going on IR. And I've been carrying Hawkinson, and in my streaming along the way have gotten David Njoku. So I'm not going to play Hawkinson over Njoku anytime soon.
Right.
And so I might be in a roster crunch where I'm dropping TJ Hawkinson because I have to pick up all these receivers to replace the receivers that are missing. So there are situations where you're going to probably have Hawkinson coming off IR. You've picked him up because you were a smart fantasy manager to see what he was going to look like or what your tight end situation was going to look like come this point in the season. But we're now 9 weeks into the season, coming off the greatest week ever in the history of tight ends. And if the guy that you picked up has been successful for the last several weeks and not just a one-hit wonder a la Adam Troutman, for example, so you have somebody that you're comfortable with and comfortable starting, you may have to drop Hawkinson. It just sucks.
Yeah, but wouldn't you rather try? So I was about to suggest, well, why don't you just try and trade TJ Hawkinson? But to your point, it's a fertile position right now. Everybody, I'm in a league where I think I have Ferguson and Otten. So I'm furiously trying to trade one of them to upgrade at wide receiver. And I go to everybody else's roster, and there's like one team that's thin at tight end. That's it.
Yeah.
So even suggesting trading TJ Hawkinson isn't going to be the easiest thing in the world. But I don't want to drop him. I hate the idea that I've already clogged this roster spot for 9 weeks or 8 weeks, whatever it is. What week are we in? 8 weeks.
Well, not necessarily.
I don't want to go and give him away to somebody else, because if he ends up being his old self, that's a good tight end. I don't want to give that up so easily.
Is he really going to be his old self? They lost their left tackle for the season, and he's coming off a torn ACL. But I mean, one league I have Hawkinson in, I have George Kittle. He's on a bye, so I'm definitely keeping TJ Hawkinson. But I could see myself dropping after one bad game. I could see him getting dropped. It's about 84% rostered anyway. So there's another guy that I think, before we even get into who to add, another guy that's really interesting do you drop right now is Jordan Mason, because it's looking like McCaffrey's going to be back next week, and Garendo is the number one running back on Jamey's list. But gosh, could you imagine if McCaffrey has a setback, and after all he's gone through, would it be shocking if he had a setback with this tendonitis? Is they're going to ramp up his workload during the bye week? Should we drop Jordan Mason or hold him?
No, when I was looking at the running back list of names to drop, and sometimes you got to find players that are highly rostered that you got to make tough choices on. And he's one of those guys that you might have to make a tough choice on. I would prefer not to drop him. I don't think it's worth it, because exactly the scenario you laid out, Adam. He's going to have a build up week, ramp up week to see how he feels going into their bye, so that when they come out of their bye, he's ready to go. But yeah, I mean, he could easily have a setback, and that's why Garendo is first on the list, because not only could he have a setback, Mason's shoulder injury keeps popping up, and he's not healthy right now. So it's a very tricky thing to do with Mason, especially again when we get, not just this week, when we get to next week. If you're the McCaffrey manager, it's very similar to Hawkinson. Coming off IR, you may have some tough roster decisions to make. You're obviously activating McCaffrey and starting him, and who's the guy you're cutting? It might be Mason, and I wouldn't recommend it, but you might have to.
Mason and Hawkinson are in the exact same canoe, where you don't want to drop them, but if it's the roster crunch thing, just like you brought up, James. So of the two, who would I rather drop? I think I'd rather drop Hawkinson. So here I am saying, don't drop Hawkinson. But if I'm choosing between a 49ers running back that could end up being a must-start type guy, or a tight end when tight ends are red hot right now, I'm dropping the tight end first.
Do you think you could tell the difference between a kayak and a canoe?
Yes.
Yes. Are you kidding me?
What's the difference?
Well, first of all, aren't kayaks sleeker and modern? And a canoe is made out of a hollowed tree trunk.
Are you asking me or telling me? I don't know.
I don't think you know.
I'm looking at a picture right now. What's the difference between kayak and canoe?
I feel like kayaks are like narrow
Yeah.
and like pointier than a canoe.
Yeah. You're right. Okay.
I mean, I am an outdoors expert, as you
Yeah.
know.
Of course you are. Of course.
Now,
All right.
when it comes to navigating calm, gentle streams, you can count on me to get you in the right type of, I don't know if it's a vehicle, but whatever it is to get you down the stream.
Thank you,
Gently
Dave.
down the stream.
You are rowing us to fantasy victory. All right, so we've talked about who to drop. Later, we're going to talk about a little bit of Steelers Giants. Just want to say Najee Harris, first time in his career with 3 straight 100-yard games. So good job.
You got to take us through what last night was like for you.
You're going to be a little surprised when I take you through what last night was for me, and probably happy, probably proud of me. But before we get to that, top 3 waiver wire priorities, Jamey, for week 9.
Cedric Tillman is number 1 by far. It's not close. Just looking like the number 1 receiver for the Browns.
Who?
Number 2, I'm going to say Matthew Stafford because.
Wait, who is number 1?
Oh, here we go.
Listen, you get your 1, you're good.
Tillman, baby. All right, go ahead. Sorry.
Cedric Tillman. Number 2 is Mecole Hardman, and number 3 is Michael Pittman. Number 2 is Matthew Stafford. Hopefully he's got his band back together and he's good to go. 32, whatever it was, 0.7 fantasy points in his first full game with Puka and Cooper Kupp. So great matchup against the Seahawks and favorable upcoming schedule. And number 3 is Bo Nix. Just looking at what he's done in 3 of his last 4 games, he actually has 4 games in a row with 6 fantasy points on just his rushing totals alone. 2 games over 60 yards rushing, 2 games with 2 rushing touchdowns, not at the same time. So he's gotten you some pretty solid production with his rushing, which we know he's capable of being a good running quarterback. And then he gets the Ravens this week. So hopefully he does what every quarterback has done recently against Baltimore.
And it's weird to say he gets the Ravens this week and mean it in a positive way.
Yep.
But I just watched Jameis Winston torch the Ravens defense. He made some mistakes, obviously, but the Ravens pass rush isn't what you think it is. And their secondary is so beat up right now that even multiple Browns wide receivers can look really good against them.
Okay, so Tillman, Stafford, Bo Nix. Let me just get a few more names and we'll go to Dave. But let's say I don't need a quarterback and we've got the Niners and Steelers on a bye this week.
Yeah, I got that.
So, Dave, I'll throw it to you. Who are the top waiver wire priorities to you?
So my top 3, if we exclude the quarterbacks, because I think Stafford and Nix belong in that range. Tillman is number 1. Elijah Moore would be number 2. So right off the top, 2 Browns players. I know that sounds gross, but just the way that this offense might be operating under Jameis Winston, I'll take the guys that are going to get a lot of targets from week to week. So Tillman 1, Elijah Moore 2, Hunter Henry is 3. So we're going right after those awesome offenses across the league, guys. Browns and Patriots players. Oh, yeah. Tillman, Moore, and then Hunter Henry.
Are you expecting Drake May to play this week?
No, but he'll play. As of now, no, because he had a concussion, but he'll be back eventually. And we know that Hunter Henry is going to get some decent target volume from week to week.
I also want to encourage people to get ahead of the game with bye weeks.
Yes, I was going to do the exact same thing.
Yeah, because you may not need someone for this week, but the buys, we really haven't had that many buys, and they're going to come pretty fast. This week, only 2 teams, but pretty soon it's going to be 4 teams, 6 teams, so just take a look at your roster and players who have good matchups in the weeks that your starting quarterback is out, something like that, and get ahead of the game. So Cedric Tillman, let me ask you this. If Jerry Jeudy were available, how would you rank the 3 Browns receivers?
Oh, if Jerry Jeudy were available, then I would go Tillman 1, Elijah Moore 2, and Jerry Jeudy 3.
Okay. Jeudy had a good game too.
Tillman
the schedule is just so brutal for them coming up. That's the only.
So that's the other thing. Yes, the schedule's really bad.
So again, looking ahead at some of the bye week situation, and then we'll get into this, but like their matchup in week 11 against the Saints is like the one you want to target right now for the Browns, for Jameis at least.
And so in weeks 12 and 14, when there's 6 teams on bye, the Browns play the Steelers and the Steelers.
Yeah. They got the Chargers this week, who would give up the fewest fantasy points to wide receivers. And they haven't really been super tested, but they've done really well against Marvin Harrison, George Pickens, Devontae Adams. So it's not great. And it's going to be a totally different experience for the Browns, going from one of the best matchups to arguably the worst matchup. Okay, but you got to take a chance. You got to see what happens there. And someone said, look at this. Lost last night on the Daniel Jones interception by 0.02 points.
Oh,
140.78 to 140.76 on the Daniel Jones interception.
our guy needs a stat correction.
There
Man,
were so many things that went wrong for the Giants last night.
Yeah.
Like they showed up.
No, they played. I mean, they gave him a game, right? They gave him a game.
No, they did.
You know what? I mean, no, this guy's not really available on waivers, but Devin Singletary now, if you have him, because Tyrone Chase is in the concussion protocol, and the Commanders are definitely one of the best matchups.
Yeah.
So don't drop Singletary just yet. Quick notes here. We're on CBS Sports Network today, Tuesday at noon Eastern. Usually it's 1 p.m. Eastern on Tuesday, Wednesday, Friday. This week it's noon on Tuesday and then 1 p.m. Eastern on Wednesday and Friday. So another great way to get different content. I mean, honestly, the Tuesday show is kind of similar to what we do here because you got to talk waiver wire, but we also play the top 20 game show now for fantasy football. Who has more? We play that every Tuesday on CBS Sports Network. So please watch us. Today we're at noon Eastern, but Wednesday and Friday, 1 p.m. Eastern. Schedule alert. I'll tell you who has good schedules, who has bad schedules in a little bit. Let's take a quick break. But before we do that, let's get on BetMGM. If you haven't signed up for BetMGM yet, use the bonus code FANTASY, and you're going to get up to a $1,500 first bet offer on your first wager with BetMGM. So here's how it works. Download the BetMGM app, sign up using the bonus code FANTASY. You deposit at least $10 and place your first wager on any game, and you're going to receive up to $1,500 in bonus bets if your bet loses. Just make sure you use the bonus code FANTASY when you sign up. All right, quick break. I'll tell you who has good and bad schedules after this.
Welcome to JJ's.
I'll have a... Wait, there's no way I can get a burger?
No chance, but you can have the NFL on CBS streams live on Paramount+. Oh, hang on. There's a toy.
All right, schedule alert. Good schedules coming up. Aaron Rodgers, the Texans, Cardinals, Colts, a bye, and then Seattle. But his next three opponents are 25th, 26th, and 21st in fantasy points and allowed to quarterbacks. Rodgers, I know everybody, hey, he washed up. He scored 21 points last week, so still has good weapons. Parker Washington, if you want to pick up, or maybe it's Gabe Davis, if you want to pick up a Jacksonville wide receiver. They got the Eagles and Vikings and Lions in the next 3 weeks. And Eagles are playing a lot better lately, I'll say that. Vikings and Lions, very bad against receivers. TJ Hawkinson, got to mention this. He has a great schedule. His next three opponents are the Rams, Colts, and Jaguars. They rank 30th, 29th, and 23rd against tight ends. Just question of what he's going to be, after this long layoff. Evan Ingram has a terrible schedule. And I don't, this is, I don't know if it matters with tight ends. It's like you could have 2 bad weeks against tight ends. You could face much tougher competition against tight ends than other teams and look like a really good matchup. But for what it's worth, on paper, Evan Ingram, 4 of his next 5 games are against teams that are currently top 5 against tight ends. But Philadelphia just gave up 77 yards to Mike Gesicki last week, or 73 yards. They're 3rd best against tight ends. So you don't know how legit it is, but on paper, it's not good. Here's someone who has a great matchup coming up. Great matchups coming up. Adam Troutman. Baltimore, 28th against tight ends. Kansas City, 32nd against tight ends. And then Atlanta, 22nd.
It's the first time he's done anything.
I know. But if you're desperate in a super deep league, he's 1% rostered. Adam Troutman. He'll probably be terrible.
See, that's a Bo Nix stat if there ever was one.
Well, no, because the Chiefs aren't as bad against quarterbacks as they are against tight ends. The Ravens, yes.
Is the Chiefs number tilted because of what happened in week 1?
No, not really. You mean tight ends?
Yeah.
No.
I mean, they just held Bowers to like 10.8 PPR points.
Yeah, but Kittle had 5 for 58 for Bowers, 6 for 92 for Kittle the week before that. Foster Moreau caught a touchdown the week before that.
Adam Troutman ain't George Kittle.
No. Listen,
I think you're trying to make a joke, but I do think Bo Nix has a pretty good schedule. Moving
and Jameis Winston has a bad schedule, as we've kind of mentioned.
Yes.
All right, news and notes here. Jordan Love, good news on him. I mean, he may not play this week, but it's not a serious injury, and he hasn't been ruled out for this week. They get Detroit this week. Would love to see. Oh boy, we'd love to see that fantasy bonanza. Then a bye, and then very realistic. I think that Love is playing after the bye. Drake May's in the concussion protocol. Derek Carr has a good chance to play this week at Carolina. He played Carolina week 1. He torched them. Jameis Winston has been declared the starter going forward. The Colts and the Panthers both have not decided on quarterbacks right now. And this is a big deal because if Josh Downs is out there, and I think he's about 67% owned,
Yep.
Does he go to the top of the list if Joe Flacco's named the quarterback?
For the rest of the season, absolutely. Yeah.
But it's got to be named Joe Flacco's the starter for the rest of the season.
Well, last week I made the case to drop Downs and Pittman. This week I put Downs back in the shallow league spot.
Sure.
So if Tillman and Downs were out there and we find out today that they're going to Flacco for this week, they're not saying for rest of season. They say we're going to.
They don't have to. They wouldn't do that. I would put Downs ahead of Tillman.
Yep.
Okay. Downs has had 3 big games with Flacco, and Pittman's been good too. So don't drop Pittman yet.
No.
Running back news: Tyrone Tracy's in the concussion protocol, and he looks good, by the way.
He looks really good. And it's funny, like I'm looking at his game log right now. He's got 3 games with at least 17 carries, 14 PPR points or more in all 3. So anytime he's gotten work, he's been great.
But he probably won't get work this week because I don't know. I just kind of assume concussion protocol, probably missing a game. Kendra Miller,
he played on Monday.
Yeah,
he's going to play on Sunday, so it's a shorter week than normal.
And Kendra Miller left in the second half, and that's all I got at running back, basically. Hopefully Tyjae Spears is back this week. Wide receiver Christian Kirk's out for the season. I haven't seen an update on Gabe Davis. Brian Thomas, we got a report that he could miss 2 to 4 weeks, and then right after that, he's like, I'm day to day, basically. Or, he says he's feeling good.
Team of injuries,
yeah,
over the last month or so.
So Brian Thomas Jr., you might have him this week at Philadelphia. Deebo Samuel, I thought it was a ribs injury. It's a strained oblique, so hopefully he gets right over the bye. DK Metcalf's looking good for this week. T. Higgins is day to day, and Stephon Diggs, haven't gotten an update on Stephon Diggs yet, but he plays third. I mean, he's got a Thursday game.
He listed as DNP in the estimated practice program.
That I saw, but we're thinking could be a long-term injury. So far, no news. Tight end news: Juwan Johnson's cleared concussion protocol, and an offensive line. What do you guys think about the Vikings without Christian Darrisaw?
It's not good. He's been arguably one of, if not the best players at his position since he's come into the league, and he's having one of the best seasons at that position this year. So to lose him, as we've talked about a lot, Sam Darnold does not do well under pressure, and so you're taking him away, taking Darrisaw away on such a stupid decision on how he got hurt. To try and run that play at the end of the half where they were on the field. So it sucks. Look, you're not running away from any of the Vikings' main guys this week. They're playing the Colts. Moving forward, we'll see what happens.
You try to sell Justin Jefferson for whatever you want.
If you're getting something elite for Justin Jefferson, sure. If that's your concern. But I think this is more an indictment on where Darnold's ceiling is as opposed to Jefferson's. Because
correct.
We'll see Jefferson still get, 10 targets. They may be ugly targets at times, but he's still going to get, his numbers.
And might this be something that helps Hawkinson? Because if Darnold's going to be pressured sooner, that means he's going to want to get the ball out faster. So those shorter targets could be more in play, and that's exactly what Hawkinson can do.
He also could be chipping too.
That's true. And
chip and still get the target.
Mateo is saying, is Deontay Johnson getting traded? According to Adam Schefter, it's
been rumored for weeks. I'm sure it's happening.
Yeah, it could certainly happen. All right. Pick up Larry Coker, right, Dave? Different Coker. There's a lot of other injuries on defense. I think a big one just to mention is that CJ Mosley, Jets linebacker, he's got a neck issue. And he's going to get that checked out, obviously hoping for the best there. But he's a key piece for them. And Baltimore nose tackle Michael Pierce left with a calf injury. They obviously have an amazing run defense, but that could help Javonte Williams if Pierce is out. How much FAAB on Cedric Tillman, Dave?
Not a lot. I can't imagine that you're so desperate for receiver help unless you're in the situation that Jamey's in, where you'd have to spend more than 15% of your FAAB on Tillman.
Well, if you're in a 3-receiver league that starts a flex, a few leagues I could think to myself, man, I would probably spend at least 15.
Full PPR.
Yeah, PPR at least 15, maybe close to 25 on.
Oh, man, look,
Yeah, if you're in that much need, then of course you'll spend more than 15%. But just in a vacuum, I would not go higher than that.
yeah, your record is going to determine how much you spend at this point.
I guess what are your expectations for Tillman, Moore, and Judy rest of season? They are top what receivers?
I think they're all, in the top 36 conversation. Tillman being the most likely based on the 2 games that we've seen without Amari Cooper. Elijah Moore probably second, just based on the 1 game sample size that we have with Jameis starting. And then Judy's just been a little frustrating over the last 2 games without Cooper, but he did have a good game, as you alluded to, Adam. But it feels like they all, did something just based on how Jameis performed. I would guess, based on how these matchups are going to go, and Nick Chubb still not being Nick Chubb, that they're throwing a lot. And so Jameis throwing a lot makes them all viable to whatever extent, despite some tough matchups. So I don't want to overvalue these guys by any stretch. Clearly, they're all available to some degree. Judy's the highest rostered at 66%. Elijah Moore's at 4%. Tillman's at 21%. So just looking at the target opportunities and a quarterback like Jameis, who is going to just take chances. I mean, that's just the nature of his game, especially going into that week 10 game again, or week 11 game, excuse me. They were buying week 10. Their week 11 game against the Saints, which, I know the numbers are still favorable, but the matchup, I think, is more in the favor of the Browns passing offense. I would be looking at, okay, maybe he gets me through this week, and then hopefully you can roster him through the bye week, Tillman, or any of these guys, I guess, and then get to week 11 and then see what happens moving forward. But yeah, those 2 matchups against Pittsburgh coming up, it's sandwiched around another tough game too. It's not exactly the most encouraging schedule for the Browns moving forward.
Chargers, bye, Saints, Steelers, Broncos, Steelers. So yeah, and then Chiefs. It's not good.
Right. But again, we're looking 4 or 5 games ahead. Injuries could be, the Ravens defense, I know, not good. They've just melted down from injuries. And now it's just okay, free space. So you could see some injuries here or there, and those guys look all of a sudden that much better.
Yeah. Okay. And let's get to the top 3 players at each position. And Jamey, I'll give you the quarterbacks, and then Dave, you get the running back. You get the glamour position this week, baby.
Oh boy.
All right, Jamey, who are the top 3 quarterbacks to get?
Top 2 are easy. Stafford and Bo Nix. Stafford again getting his guys back. Nix playing very well and getting good schedule, at least for this week. I still have Jameis 3 right now. That would change if Flacco's named the starter, so you can move Flacco ahead of Jameis. But this is one of those positions, you talked about this in terms of looking ahead. So I have some guys listed in the column as, hey, look at week 11, look at week 12, look at week 13, look what's coming up for some of these players that you may be, pivoting to help them. So, if you're just looking at that for Jameis, okay, week 11 could be top 12 quarterback that week, but I know the Chargers matchup is tough. If I'm down Purdy and I'm down Russell Wilson, desperate situation. I started Russell Wilson in the 14-team league last night or this week. I'll start Winston, as opposed to, trying to still trust CJ Stroud without his receivers against the Jets, one of those situations.
Okay. And yeah, so this week, the 2 teams on bye are Pittsburgh and San Francisco. Week 10 is the Browns, Packers, Raiders, and Seahawks. Week 11, Cardinals, Panthers, Giants, Bucks. Week 12, we have 6 teams on bye. So weeks 10, 11, and 12, you really need to start planning ahead. Quarterbacks.
You could do it in week 14 as well when Lamar's on bye. Bo Nix is now a fantasy starter. He's on bye. Stroud is on bye.
I think you have time for then.
Yeah, but I don't mind planning that far ahead because that's the last week.
You have to have the luxury of
season.
You gotta have the luxury of roster spots to play with like that. Quarterback situation is fine, and you can make it through those weeks and carry the second quarterback until then. 100% do it. But I mean, with all these players, just think about the guys that aren't on IR that you have to carry. Mike Evans not going on IR stinks for your fantasy roster because you got to stash him on your bench. Yeah. We're now, it's not just, okay, I got my quarterbacks on a bye in week 14. You probably have 3 or 4 guys that are on a bye between then that you got to manage your roster spots as well. So it's just tough to carry a quarterback, 3-4 weeks ahead of time.
And it is a fairly deep position. So there seems to be waiver wire options in I think most leagues. All right, Dave, who are the
I don't mind doing it if there's a matchup I really want to exploit. Whether
I totally agree. It's just I don't think most people have the luxury of doing that. That's the problem.
All right, Dave, running back, who should we be picking up?
I still think Justice Hill is the best of what's left, and it really feels like it's a what's left situation. So if you needed somebody for this week who could start as a bye week replacement and it's full PPR, I think Justice Hill would be the highest ranked running back that I could give you. The list is more interesting if we're talking about stash candidates, and I know that that's where Jamey was kind of going with Isaac Guerrero, but Tyjae Spears is still out there in 52% of leagues. Braelon Allen has some good contingency upside, obviously. Sean Tucker, lower on the list, but someone who I think is still talented. He just needs an opportunity. Guerendo's in there, and then there's lesser guys after that are rookies like Vidal, Corum, Jalen Wright. And then if you can't get your hands on Justice Hill and you need a running back for this week, it's kind of a good luck situation between names like Dearness Johnson and Roshan Johnson. And I mean, it's almost not worth going through the list. It's not a pretty week for running back.
Jamey, top 3 receivers that are not on the Browns.
End of show. Xavier Legette, with the potential trade of Deontay Johnson and just what he's shown when he's gotten opportunities, I think he's number 2 for me. So I want to make sure I have all the right names for me. You mentioned the Jaguar situation. I don't know what Gabe Davis' status is going to be. Parker Washington's going to be in the slot replacing Christian Kirk. So he's the easy one to go get right now. I do think Brian Thomas has a chance to play this week. So if Thomas plays, I don't really want to trust Gabe Davis anyway, even if Kirk's not out there. Yeah. And then it's really a gamble. I'm going to go back to Jalen Tolbert, who's still available in about 40% of leagues. You could go Demario Douglas if you want to, just because we haven't really seen him and Drake May in the last 2 games. May getting hurt, Douglas being sick. And Quentin Johnston, Justin Herbert has attempted on average 35 passes in his last 3 games. And so if they're going to allow him to be in that range, I don't think Josh Palmer has done enough to say, okay, we're not putting Quentin Johnston back on the field. Clearly, Ladd McConkey looks like a star in the making, and I love what Harbaugh said, comparing him to Steve Smith. That's cool. So there's now a chance for maybe Quentin Johnston to come back and take advantage of what should be some nice matchups coming up.
Is that a team that trades for Deontay Johnson?
I'd be surprised, because in their mind, they probably think Johnston's coming back, McConkey's coming on, and for what it's worth, DJ Chark is about to be active. So do they need to spend assets on that position when they don't necessarily view themselves as a team that's going to air it out to the level of some other teams? Like,
right, but you just mentioned how much they have been throwing in the last 3 weeks.
But that's not like, I think a volume that makes them spend trade chips to go get somebody.
I think if the price is cheap, I think they would. I actually think that it would be a phenomenal fit for them.
I wouldn't necessarily put them at the top of the list.
Okay.
And I think that would suck for Deontay Johnson if he goes there.
I'm not sure. I think they're embracing their passing ways. I think that this might be something that's sticky.
The waiver wire.
Hold on, that's really best for Ladd McConkey than whoever they acquire, obviously. But I don't know if they're going to go back to being so run heavy.
The waiver wire wide receiver is actually really not bad if you have Josh Downs available.
McConkey might be available in those shallow leagues.
McConkey, sorry, there are some other players.
Jacoby Myers.
Jacoby Myers, that was the guy.
Khalil Shakir, Keon Coleman.
Yep.
So maybe not saying all those guys will be available, but maybe one of them will be, and they could be good players.
And keep an eye on, again, as we start to see teams that are dealing with roster crunches. Someone that just picked up Juwan Jennings may be dropping Juwan Jennings, because he's on a bye this week. That could be somebody you look to pick up at the end of the week if he goes through waivers.
All right, tight end time. Who we at? Dave, who are the tight ends to add?
I mentioned Hunter Henry. He's my number 1 tight end to add, and then after that, it's a gross list. It's Taysom Hill, it's Noah Fant, Dalton Schultz, Mike Gesicki. It's much, much better if you're in a shallow league where you still might be able to get your mitts on Cade Otton, Hawkinson in the super shallowest of leagues, Ertz in those leagues. But that's really about it. In the majority of leagues, you might still see Hunter Henry out there. Otherwise, it's Taysom Hill, it's Noah Fant, Dalton Schultz.
Yeah, I think it depends if you need 1 week or long-term. So if you're looking long-term, I agree Hunter Henry's better. If you need 1 week, it's Gesicki. What he's done in the games that T. Higgins has missed has been pretty solid.
I'm just not convinced that T. Higgins is going to miss the game, and then I would
agree.
So you can take that up to the Sunday deadline, but what about Dalton Schultz? Because you're talking about him being in a really good spot here Thursday against the
He's been now without Nico Collins. He had 1 game without Tank Dell. He's had 3 games now without Nico Collins. Now he may not have Nico Collins and Stephon Diggs. I agree. It just feels like whatever it's worth, he's not producing, and it's frustrating.
He's not the only tight end getting targets in Houston, too. Cade Stover had a couple of nice targets. So we can't make Dalton Schultz happen.
Well, 4 catches for 52 yards on 6 targets isn't that bad of a game.
No, as a bye week replacement,
yeah,
it's fine.
That's
like
what
you
he
can use him in place.
I just look at it this way: like Gesicki's played 3 games without T. Higgins, and he's been over 70 yards receiving both times. It's hard, and 7+ targets and 8+ targets in both times. Like this is the guy. Like don't chase Josephus. Yoshi. And don't chase Burton.
I think
this is the guy to go get.
They might be phasing out Yoshivas. It could be Jermaine Burton who starts getting more work anyway. Gesicki is a 1-week option if there's no T. Higgins.
All right. He also has 1 really bad game in there. He's played 3 games without Higgins, and if I recall, 1 was really bad, 2 were very good.
1 was week 1.
Mm-hmm.
They were bad as a team.
They were bad, yeah. Okay, let's go to DSTs, Jamey. Who do we got?
This is not a pretty week either. I'm gonna go. Hey, Giants, Commanders would be 1. Bengals against the Raiders would be 2, and the Saints against the Panthers would be 3.
Washington, Cincinnati, North. Okay, and kickers?
Blake Group against the Panthers. Jake Elliott against the Jaguars, and Will Reichert against the Colts.
All right, so to recap, our top priorities are Matthew Stafford, Bo Nix, and maybe Joe Flacco or Jameis Winston at quarterback. Justice Hill, this is from Dave. Justice Hill, Tyjae Spears, Isaac Guerrero, who I know Jamey has as number 1, Braelon Allen. But that tells you something. Isaac Guerrero being number 1 on Jamey's list, going into a bye with Christian McCaffrey. Maybe.
And one guy Dave didn't mention is Jaleel McLaughlin. I mean, just looking at what his teammate has done. Javonte Williams is struggling last week against the Panthers, and McLaughlin actually looking better. I wonder if they start to give him a few more looks.
Xavier Legette, Jalen Tolbert, other than the Browns guys at wide receiver. Xavier Legette, Jalen Tolbert, Quentin Johnston. Try to get a Browns player. Tight end, Hunter Henry, Taysom Hill, Noah Fant, Mike Gesicki, and DSTs, Washington, Cincinnati, and New Orleans this week. Blake Groupie, Jake Elliott, Will Reichert at kicker. All right, one more break. When we come back, shallow leagues, deep leagues, recapping Adam's pretty upsetting Monday night, and more waiver wire and the drop-o-meter when we come back on Fantasy Football Today.
If you love football, this is the best time of the year.
This is as big as it gets.
The stuff of absolute dreams.
Well, Jamey, all of those guys are available in my league. So who should the shallow league managers be looking at? That's my new shallow league voice. Working on it's a workshopping that.
Okay, go ahead. Sorry.
No. Just go ahead, Dave.
No, I have nothing to say.
All right. So these guys that we've already talked about, they're good, but there are actually better players available in my league, Jamey. Like Tua's there. Aaron Rodgers is there. Josh Downs is there. Who should I be picking up?
You mentioned 2 of the quarterbacks. I think Justin Herbert, if you want to try and carry 2 just to see what happens moving forward. All 3 of those guys are rostered in 80% of leagues or fewer, up to 65%, which is what we talk about. The running backs are definitely better in the shallow leagues as opposed to the names that we gave you. So Jonathan Brooks is most likely going to get activated this week. We'll see what happens there. Tyrone Tracy should definitely be picked up, even though he may not play this week. He's been great in 3 of his last 4 games. And then Jalen Warren, I think, is still worth rostering also. You also have 3 handcuffs that are in this range that I would still consider lottery tickets. Ray Davis had 1 great game without James Cook. Zach Charbonnet had 2 great games without Kenneth Walker. And Tyler Algier would clearly be a must-start guy if there is no Bijan Robinson for any stretch of games. Receiver and tight end is where it gets a little bit more exciting. When you see Jawan Jennings, Khalil Shakir, Keon Coleman, Calvin Ridley, who maybe it's time to buy back into without DeAndre Hopkins. Jalen McMillan, I think, is still worth keeping an eye on. Lad McConkey, Jacoby Myers, Josh Downs, another Browns receiver in Jerry Jeudy, and Christian Watson. I wouldn't give up on him if Jordan Love is not going to miss any time.
So pause right there. So how many of those guys, if you saw them on waivers, would you take over Cedric Tillman?
I would take Jacoby Myers over Tillman. I would take McConkey over Tillman. I would take Josh Downs over Tillman. And if I'm not playing Tillman this week, I would take Jawan Jennings over Tillman.
the Josh Downs thing. That's, if we don't know who the quarterback's going to be when we're making our waiver claims, so how do you approach that? Because that's so Flacco dependent, right?
It is, but if it's a shallow league and there's so many other receivers out there, you can go ahead and get Downs now.
Okay.
And if it's Anthony Richardson and you're not comfortable with that, then you can drop Downs for another one of those other receivers.
Fair. Okay. All right. Sorry. Tight ends.
TJ Hawkinson, I think, is worth picking up just to speculate to see what happens. Tucker Kraft obviously has been very good. Dallas Goedert, if you want to see what happens with him coming off of his hamstring injury, just with Jalen Hurts starting to play better again. The prize of this group would be K. Dotton at 75% rostered. And then Zach Ertz has just been quietly coming on the last 3 weeks and certainly worth starting moving forward as long as Jade Daniels is healthy.
Dave, where would you have TJ Hawkinson on the trade chart, which is ostensibly a rest of season ranking? And I think it's the first time I've said ostensibly on the show. I just Googled it to make sure I was using it right. And I'm not sure that I am. But it's essentially a rest of season ranking. Where would you have TJ Hawkinson, do you think?
I have no idea what you mean when you use those big words. I've got him last week. He was 12th. Okay. He's probably going to be right in that same range. He might be 13th now.
Right. And that's what I'm talking about. Like, if that's our expectation for him, that I can't say he's a must roster. If you've picked up Njoku.
Right. It's what we talk. It's just, it would suck to drop him.
Yeah.
After carrying him. But if he's the free agent in your league, then
okay, but you have K. Dotton or TJ Hawkinson. You only carry one. Who are you carrying?
I'm carrying K. Dotton.
Dalton Kincaid or TJ Hawkinson. Who are you carrying?
Kincaid.
Kyle Pitts or TJ Hawkinson?
Oh, come on.
Yeah, Pitts.
I mean, that's where we are.
But here's a tough one: is Tucker Kraft, because you might have Malik Willis this week and then a bye.
They were tied last week on the trade chart. I might have to put Kraft in front of Hawkinson. And you have to put Mark Andrews in front of Hawkinson right now. So, no, not a top 12 tight end rest of the way.
Yeah, if someone's asking Pat Freiermuth or Hawkinson, that's where you go Hawkinson.
I agree.
Especially since Freiermuth's on a bye. That's a layup. All right, let's go to Dave. None of these guys are TJ Hawkinson. He's been rostered since day one. None of these guys are available in my league.
That's ostensibly the best voice that you do on this show.
Thank you.
Jameis Winston and Joe Flacco. Two guys that, we've been trusting in fantasy football for decades, available in over 80% of leagues. I'd play it safe and take Jameis first, unless we hear on Tuesday that Joe Flacco will be the starter the rest of the way. But the mere fact that Shane Steichen isn't naming a starter tells me that there's a reasonably good chance that Joe Flacco is going to play, especially after Anthony Richardson admitted that he was too tired to play a third down.
I don't want to go on a tangent here, but is that really so bad? Because he was scrambling and fighting through tacklers and all that. Like, I'm okay with it.
Don't admit it if it's really true, at least.
I'm okay with it. You don't want your quarterback to be
of course you are. But if you're a teammate and you're fighting and you're playing that down and your quarterback pulls himself from the game.
It was fourth down, wasn't it?
I think it was a third down.
I think it was after third down. I thought he came out, but all right. People are really. It seems like the Colts are not happy about that. I thought it was
might be why Joe Flacco starts. So
responsible thing to do. Go ahead, Dave. Sorry.
All right, but being responsible until we know, or unless you think that Winston's not going to get picked up, then you can pick up Flacco and then hope that Winston's there if Richardson's named the starter. But semantics. If those guys are somehow not available in your league, then I don't know which quarterback you'd got. Mason Rudolph.
That's okay.
It's gross. It's disgusting. I feel bad for you if that's the case. All right, running back. It's only stash guys that are going to be available in the deep leagues that you would be interested in. Tucker, Garendo, Jalen Wright isn't even that good of one. If you need somebody for this week, Dearness Johnson, 88% available. Miles Sanders, 87% available. That's assuming that Jonathan Brooks does not play. We did see Sanders get a lot of catches with Bryce Young last week. Wide receivers that are available deep, the Browns guys. Jalen Coker for the Panthers. He appears to be their slot guy and could end up being one of their three top receivers rest of season once they move on from Deontay Johnson. And then other guys that you've heard of before, like Demarcus Robinson, Nick Westbrook-Akine, Jermaine Burton is a stash. He's 95% available. Parker Washington, obviously 99% available, and he could be the slot receiver rest of season for Jacksonville. And then tight end, Gesicki, 82% available. Noah Fant, 89% available.
Perfect. All right. Pittsburgh, 26, Giants, 18. So yeah, yesterday was a trifecta of Knicks, Giants, Yankees, all losing. And what order do you think I was most upset about? Like I was most upset about which team and in what order?
It better be the Yankees.
It's not the Yankees.
Yeah. For you to even ask that question, tipped me off that it wasn't the Yankees. Like you're resigned to the fact that the Yankees are going to lose the World Series. That's what
I was resigned after game one. Yeah.
Giants, Knicks, Yankees.
It started out Knicks, Yankees, Giants, but then when the Giants had a chance to win the game and they turned the ball over twice, that pathetic sack strip fumble recovery, strip sack, sorry. And then the pathetic interception. I was incensed. So I think it ended up being Giants, Knicks, Yankees. I was really pissed about the Knicks. But you guys might be proud. I was most angry. I needed 10 points in a half PPR league from Malik Neighbors to win my softball league and get to 500. And he just kept dropping passes and almost touchdown and this and that. I was furious. That was the one thing that I was so messed up, but he did get it. So it turned my night around. But I just like the Giants actually play a decent game. You know, their red zone defense is pretty good. So they kept doing that. They had a chance to win. This is about as good as Daniel Jones can play. And then a fumble and an interception with the game on the line. And it's just
stupid conversion call. So dumb.
Which one?
The play.
No, it was a great call. They just didn't block. They had an easy walking two-point look at the play.
They do that now when they're down like 7 late in the game.
Steelers had, I think, one guy out there. The Giants had 4 or 5 people that were supposed to block. They didn't see the ball get snapped. The one guy comes in and tackles Malik Neighbors. It was set up perfectly. Unbelievable. They should have had that easy 2-point conversion. But anyway, let's talk about the game. Pittsburgh 26, Giants 18. Honestly, Russell Wilson, you can't really argue with 20 of 28 for 278 yards, 1 touchdown. George Pickens had 2 called back.
Come on.
Van Jefferson was open for a touchdown. So it was almost a big game for Wilson. But what are you thinking, Dave, about the Steelers offense going forward?
I think they look great. And it's been 2 weeks now, and certainly some of it has to do with who they've played, but I think Russ has looked awesome. He's turned back the clock. His accuracy is mostly fine. He's making it work with Pickens. You should still be excited about George Pickens, despite the fact that he had 2 touchdowns called back. Van Jefferson is turning into somebody. Maybe we should have mentioned him as somebody in deep leagues, although they're going into the bye. You're not going to carry him. So only in the deepest of benches could you carry Van Jefferson right now. But it's kind of a fun offense that really turned the corner the second Russ went in under center. And he's a better thrower than Justin Fields, and that's made all the difference in the world. Defenses seem to respect the throw a lot more with Wilson than they did with Fields, and I think that's helped Najee see fewer stacked boxes. I'm encouraged by it, and I think the Steelers are absolutely a legit contender in the AFC.
But is Najee a must-start running back now? Do we forget about the rest of his career, basically, and say this is a new Najee Harris?
Well, as far as running backs go, can you name 24 guys you'd rather have than Najee, especially considering the work that he's been getting, the efficiency he's delivered in these last 2 games? He even had 3 catches on 4 targets against the Giants.
Sounds like a challenge. Derrick Henry, Saquon Barkley, Alvin Kamara, Kyron Williams, Jahmyr Gibbs, Bijan Robinson, James Cook, Josh Jacobs, Breece Hall, Joe Mixon, David Montgomery, James Conner, Christian McCaffrey, Ken Walker, Aaron Jones. I would DeAndre Swift, yes.
Yep.
That's
say James Cook.
I did. Jonathan Taylor would be 18. Tony Pollard would be 19, but that one's debatable. Devon Achane would be 20.
Yeah.
That's pretty
much. 20. I said 24.
Okay. So then there's other guys that are in that range. Would you
rather have him than, excuse me, than Dobbins or Brian Robinson? I might take those guys ahead of Najee too. But I think he's maybe it's at best, not at worst, a low end number 2 fantasy running back.
Yeah. Okay. And Jamey, on the Giants side, let's talk about Malik Neighbors, because it was a struggle once again. Not a terrible game, 7 for 77, I believe, on 13 targets. Almost had a few big plays. Schedule's going to get easier. We think, Washington, I don't know what to make of them. They look pretty damn good, but the schedule is going to get easier. But what's your level of confidence in Malik Neighbors being a top 12 wide receiver rest of season?
I mean, whether he's top 12 or top 20, he's an auto start every week, 2 receiver leagues. Like, there's no way you're getting away from him. 13 targets in this game. You know, he's 7 for 71. If he finds the end zone or connects on one of those plays, like the sideline route where he dropped the ball, you know, was a 30-yard catch potentially. You know, so if he's 8 for 100, nobody's getting upset about that. So yeah, must start guy.
Okay.
I wish they would trade Darius Slayton to help Slayton get some fantasy value maybe somewhere. So he's someone that clearly not in their future. And unfortunately, I think it's time to drop Wan'Dale Robinson.
It was the first game with like fewer than 9 targets in a long time. Not really sure why.
It's just the yardage is
They
not
could
there.
run the ball.
And Theo Johnson's looking better.
They
Theo's involved in that last drive.
Well, what was weird was that Slayton got 7 targets because usually he's pretty invisible when Neighbors plays. But I thought about that during the show. I said, you know, if Darius Slayton had gone to a different team, had been drafted by a different team, I wonder if he could have had a really like fantasy relevant
trade him.
And I don't think they're gonna do that. All right, it's time for the Drop-O-Meter. Jordan Addison, 94% rostered.
So he was someone I considered putting in the column. The only thing is the next 2 games. Like, the last thing you want to do is see him face the Colts and the Jaguars and go off knowing you just dropped him. So if he's the last guy on your roster, you have to make a move for someone. Like if it's Tillman versus Addison right now, I would drop Addison for Tillman just based on the player who's hot as opposed to the one who's struggling. Plus you have Hockenson coming back, which could make things even worse for Addison. But I still think just knowing the next 2 games, like he's not somebody I'd want to get rid of.
Addison or Hockenson, if you can only keep one.
Depends on who my tight end is.
Well, let's say your tight end's pretty good. Most people have
I'm dropping Hockenson.
Okay. Yeah, it's probably the right move. But I think he's pretty droppable. Just
Vikings. All right, let's go to our next guy. Vikings are 5-2, by the way. They're in 3rd place in the NFC North. They get to play the next 3 games against the AFC South teams that are not named Houston. So they'll be looking forward to that. Drop-O-Meter on Romeo Doubs, 91% rostered with Detroit and then a bye. And I know you're the way you're looking at me, but I'm thinking it's Malik Willis and then a bye. You know, any wide receiver not named Jaden Reed, I guess is what I'm saying for the Packers. What are you doing?
I mean, Dobbs has been better than Jaden Reed for the last 3 games.
Yeah. I'm not sure if I can say that Reed is their best receiver anymore. Last 3 weeks, Dobbs has looked fantastic. So all he needed to do was get ticked off and ditch the team for a week. And I guess like that's the ultimate squeaky wheel of all time. Because now he's come back and he's playing great. He's certainly the guy that Jordan Love's been counting on. I agree. I don't feel good starting him if Malik Willis is under center. So we might have 2 dud weeks in front of us, one of them being a bye. But Romeo Doubs is someone I absolutely want to roster. That's a 0 on the drop-o-meter.
All right, Christian Watson then.
He's much higher. He's probably like in that same range as Jordan Addison. What did I say for Addison? An 8?
Mm-hmm.
He's probably an 8.5.
CJ Stroud, Jets this week.
I mean, like if you're stuck and you want to pivot to, you know, Bo Nix or Stafford, then I get it. I would just hate to see him get his guys back and all of a sudden he's, you know, lighting up the rest of the season.
It's like a 6 in a 12-team league, and in a 10-team league, it's like a 9.
How about
There's something going on there, Adam, because that offensive line hasn't been as good, and now he's jittery. Like I don't think he was really like this much as a rookie. And now these last 2 games, man, like he's kind of melted down a little bit. And then losing Diggs on top of it, I think is going to be a big problem.
I gave some stat. We talked about him on Beyond the Box Score. What's the difference between 2023 Stroud and 2024 Stroud? And if there's one thing, it's the lack of big plays. It's, you know, they're getting nothing from Tank Dell. Diggs is going to miss time. Nico Collins is his only big play guy, but it's just he was second. Last year, Stroud was second in explosive plays per dropback. This year, he's like 28th or something like that. All right. A few more.
Rank these 3 for week number 9. Stafford, Nix, Stroud.
Stroud's easy 3rd.
Agreed. So you can move on from him if you can grab one of those other quarterbacks.
All right. You might regret it when Nico comes back. But
Yeah, that's one like I'd rather roster Stroud and another quarterback like Stafford or Nix just because of the potential volatility of those 2 guys, as opposed to rostering 2 tight ends with Hockenson.
All right, real quick here. Hold on.
What Stroud did earlier this season when he had his complete receiving core?
Yeah, I know. It wasn't that good.
He wasn't that great. He had 2 games over 22 fantasy points, but no 30-point games. One was 27.5.
All right, guys. Let me give you a few more drop-o-meter, guys. Jameis and Williams, 87% rostered.
He's droppable if you need someone for this week and just hope you can get him back.
And Jalen McMillan.
See, I'd want to keep him at least one more week. I know it's a tough matchup against the
Agreed.
Chiefs, but he's playing the Godwin role, and that's something I think will eventually pay some dividends.
And I would like to update everybody on the FFT Open. You may remember 5 weeks ago, I bragged about being 3-0 in the FFT Open, said I was going to win the entire thing. I'm on a 5-game losing streak. I am 3-5, another close loss yesterday. And I have the second most points in the league. I am 2 points back of the points leader, but I am 3-5. So that is.
I'm getting boat raced by the guys in my league. I've had some pretty bad luck.
How
I
about
just
you?
lost second in a row. I was undefeated and then lost 2 in a row.
All right, you're all right.
My team's given up the most fantasy points in our league, so
That's tough.
I'm terrible defense by me. Yeah.
So listen, I not doing this for the FFT Open, but I strongly recommend. This is what I do when I'm the commissioner of leagues. 12-team league, top 6 teams make the playoffs. It's based on record, but if you have the most points in the league, you are guaranteed a spot in the playoffs. If you're not a top 6 team and you somehow have the most points, you're in, and the team with the 6th best record is out. All right, waiver wire. So Tua, Herbert, Rodgers. How many of them, Jamey, would you take ahead of Matthew Stafford?
None.
Okay. Stafford ahead of Tua, Herbert, and Rodgers. Rodgers, with this favorable schedule coming up, do we feel like 63% rostered is about right for him? Too low, too high? Where's the porridge on Aaron Rodgers?
I would say that's a little low.
Okay.
I think it's a little high. I know that we're expecting him to eventually break out, but there's something about this Jets team that just is not clicking.
Yeah. I talked about this. I don't remember. I think I don't remember what it was. The offenses that I feel like things should be easier for, like they should be doing better. Eagles. I know that's funny coming off the game they just had.
Right. They just did. So
they did.
They're turning the corner.
But their passing game, maybe you could say. But Eagles, Jets for sure, and I would say the Bengals. Like it just feels like they should be doing better.
Well, they were looking better, and then Higgins missed last week.
Yeah, it's funny. They've been terrible without T.
But like think about that Giants game. He had the 50-ish yard rushing touchdown. They just haven't. There should be an easy button and there just isn't. All right. So we like Stafford, we like Bo Nix and Jameis Winston, Joe Flacco, Derek Carr. If you need a quarterback, I mean he thrashed Carolina. They're horrible.
27.3 points against Carolina in week 1. Bo Nix just lit them up for over 30 fantasy points. So it's deeper league, 1 week streamer. Not bad.
And who was
think about how silly this sentence is. Can Derek Carr do what he did in week 1 without Rashid Shaheed?
Against that team, yes.
He might.
And then Trevor Lawrence is playing pretty well. If he gets Brian Thomas back, then you might be able to consider Trevor Lawrence. He's got Philadelphia, Minnesota, Detroit.
That's more for the next 2 games as opposed to this week, because this week Thomas is clearly going to be questionable. No Kirk, first game without him. Then I think those 2 other games you want to buy into it. He's coming off his best game of the season.
Okay, and I just want to ask you about one more guy. Malik Willis is not the guy, but I just want to throw him out there. You might start him. But Drake May, I know we're not expecting him to play. He might play, but it's got a concussion. But this guy, 24.8 points at Jacksonville, 25.5 against Houston. Those are great matchups. 11.5 fantasy points in limited action against the Jets because he had 46 rushing yards and a touchdown, but he's running a lot. So is Drake May a guy that's going to, become a must-start quarterback? Should we be stashing him?
Yes, has an upcoming game against the Dolphins, so that's not a bad matchup. But for what it's worth, the Titans, I know last week notwithstanding, and it feels like they may have given up, after you trade Hopkins, and did the team just, pack it in already for the season. But at least for the most part, they've done well against opposing quarterbacks. But I think mostly just because you want to carry him potentially missing this week's game. That's the decision I think you have to make.
Okay, let's go to the running backs here, and let's talk about the shallow league running backs. How would you rank Jonathan Brooks, Ray Davis, Tyrone Tracy? Just how about those 3?
Tracy, Brooks, Davis.
Yeah. Agreed.
Okay. And do you think Jonathan Brooks is more who's more droppable, Jonathan Brooks or TJ Hawkinson?
Hawkinson.
Okay. And then there's Jalen Warren and Zach Charbonnet and it's just handcuffs. I'm not going to waste that much time on running backs. But Jaleel McLaughlin, you made an interesting point about him that maybe he starts to get a little bit more work. Tyjae Spears, I did want to bring this up with Tyjae Spears because 2 games ago for Spears, it's been like 4 weeks against the Dolphins. I think he had 16 carries to Pollard's 21, something like that. And I'm pretty sure the following week they had the same amount of carries or very similar before Spears got hurt. So look, I'm just throwing that out there. It's not impossible that he's a double-digit carry guy, maybe in the 12 range or something like that on a weekly basis.
Well, he's one of these running backs that has the same type of upside if something happens to the back in front of him. And
yeah.
I don't know if that's you're talking about that Dolphins game.
Mm-hmm.
Pollard had 22 for 88. Spears had 15 for 39. The following week, Pollard had like 17 carries. I don't know when Spears got hurt in that game, but he had 6 carries.
Early,
yards. Maybe they were splitting close to even at that point, and then he got hurt, and then Pollard took off.
That's what I'm saying. But unlike the other handcuffs, you might get 10 to 12 carries or something like that from Tyjae Spears.
Right. So he's
Tyjae Spears and Jalen Warren are very similar. They're going to be potential
Yes.
lottery tickets if something happens to the guy in front of them. They're also going to play enough that they should get you Warren has gotten you 7.9 PPR points in back-to-back weeks. Like in a desperate situation, that's not awful with the chance of it being more. And so those are the type of guys that are good stash candidates on your bench, but they don't have as much upside if the other guys stay healthy. However, there's probably more upside for Braelon Allen, for example, if he ever gets a starting job, or as we've seen for Charbonnet, if he gets a starting job. So it's just the type of things you have to weigh versus those other running backs.
Let's get to the wide receivers here because this show's getting unnecessarily long. But Jamey talked about Khalil Herbert last week. He might get traded. That's possibility still out there. They made him inactive. So you could think about, deep league stashing him. All right,
Miles Sanders too. He's also on the trade block.
Juwan Jennings, Khalil Shakir. Are you gonna drop Juwan Jennings for the Browns guys?
If you need someone this week, you have to.
Yep.
Well, let's say you didn't need someone this week.
Then no.
Okay.
Schedule's much more favorable for the 49ers than the Browns.
Would you rather have Khalil Shakir and or Keon Coleman or a Browns receiver?
The Bills.
The Bills.
Coleman's looking good the last couple of weeks. I mean, you could tell by the numbers, but even just when you watch him play, he's gotten better. Pete Prisco
both have since Cooper's come on. Shakir too.
Mm-hmm.
Calvin Ridley or Bills guys?
Bills.
And Ladd McConkey or the Bills?
McConkey.
I might take McConkey. Yeah. I'm ready to take McConkey over Shakir. I'll take McConkey over Coleman too.
Oh no! Someone just told me that Malik Neighbors lost a yard overnight. I better not have lost on a stat correction. Got to double check that. So of these,
that would make the night even worse.
Who's your favorite? Oh, forget it.
Now I know what you hated the most about last night would be losing in fantasy the day after.
Oh, that would have for sure. Okay, I still won. So, who's your favorite of the shallow league guys? Jacoby Myers, Jerry Jeudy, Josh Downs, Ladd McConkey, Calvin Ridley, Bills guys, Juwan Jennings, Jalen McMillan.
Yeah.
Who's your favorite?
McConkey, Myers, and it would be Downs if Flacco starting.
It would be Myers first, McConkey second. Yeah. Downs is probably a little more of a responsible pick than Coleman or Shakir.
And the wide receivers we've been talking about a lot. Cedric Tillman, 21% rostered. Elijah Moore, 4% rostered. Schedule's about to get tougher, but looking good. Xavier Legette and Jalen Coker. Parker Washington will play the slot role for the Jaguars. Jalen Tolbert, Quentin Johnston, Demario Douglas. Again, we still probably go another week without seeing him and Drake May. Dontavian Wicks, you could take a shot on. Nick Westbrook-Akinas caught a touchdown in 3 straight games. Yeah, 3 straight games. And what about Rashad Bateman? How do we feel about him right now?
He's kind of in that purgatory phase of I don't want to drop him if I don't have to, but I also don't want to pick him up if I don't need to.
Yeah, I like that.
What about he's going to get dropped?
What about Gabe Davis? Any interest in Gabe Davis?
I'm too snake bit from Gabe.
The only way it would be is if you find out Brian Thomas is going to miss multiple weeks.
And I have no idea if Gabe Davis is going to miss time.
Right.
Not
You've
that-
got to make sure that he plays too.
Okay, tight ends, Hawkinson, we've talked a lot about. Great matchups coming up. Tucker Kraft might have Malik Willis and then a bye. He also has a tough matchup in Detroit.
If we're talking about them, you can talk about Cade Otton, who's still available in a quarter of leagues. And
So
he would be at the top of every list.
That's what I was going to say. Would he be the most
Yes.
coveted
He
player?
was, you know, we talked about this last week. He was the player I said should be the most added player, regardless of position. And it's nice when you see something like that happen in the game afterwards, you know. So
Yeah.
clearly he's the go-to guy in this offense right now.
I feel similarly about Otton and as I do Jacoby Myers and Josh Downs if Flacco are playing. I think those guys would be absolute must rosters in every league.
Dallas McConkey should be.
Dallas Goedert, yeah, I don't know about that. Like, he still only got 6 targets. He doesn't play a ton. I don't know. But I do feel like he's had a few almost touchdowns in recent weeks, and he finally scored in this one. But it was like an incredible play. So I don't know. I'm not sure I want to buy into a 62% of the snap guy in the Chargers offense as a total must start. But everyone else seems to think he is, so we'll just go with them. Dallas Goedert has great matchups, but I don't know. Like he's still like the third wheel, right? If he comes back,
He's certainly not on the priority list by comparison to some of these other guys, but still. Jalen Hurts starting to look a little bit better. He's not a bad second tight end if you want to carry him. Like, I would carry Hawkinson over Goddard, but I don't have a problem carrying Goddard if you're stuck.
Joaquin wants to know if you like Auden better than Ingram.
Yes.
I struggle with that one because I think Evan Ingram is about to take off without Christian Kirk on the field. I like them both. And Evans will eventually be back. I'll say rest of season Ingram over Auden.
I was going to say, short term, I'll take Auden. Long term, I'll take Ingram.
Okay.
There you go.
And Mike Gesicki is our favorite waiver wire guy that's actually available. Oh, it's Jamey's favorite. Dave, you still like Henry better?
Hunter.
You like him better than Gesicki?
Yeah, again, long term, you can use Hunter Henry now and the rest of the season. Once T. Higgins is back, you won't want to start Mike Gesicki.
Yeah, I would start Gesicki over Henry this week.
If there's no T. Higgins.
And if there's no Drake May.
Well, yeah, and Henry, he did have 45 yards against the Jets, but he also had a 30-yard catch called back on a penalty, so at least he wasn't terrible. Dalton Schultz, there's a case to be made there. Taysom Hill. I think Taysom Hill could easily score a rushing touchdown against Carolina.
And he might catch a couple of passes on top of it, just like he did.
How about
Or
Will
he could do nothing.
Disley?
That's just the Taysom Hill experience.
Will Disley's got 18 targets in his last 2 games for the Chargers. Gets Cleveland this week. It's Tennessee. They've been good against tight ends, but who knows?
Listen, he's a benefactor of the team throwing a little bit more. Maybe we should take him a little more seriously.
Tyler Conklin, Noah Fant, Adam Troutman. These are other guys. And then any interest in Brenton Strange if Brian Thomas were out, maybe?
Not really.
Okay. DSTs, the Commanders are at the Giants. The Bengals are against the Raiders. And the Saints are at the Panthers. And Blake Rupe, Jake Elliott, some kickers you can pick up. That's it for fantasy football today. We'll talk to you noon Eastern on CBS Sports Network. Have a great day, everybody. See ya.